Hey, it's time for Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, and we're telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. Casey Cares is that intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Housing is a major issue in our country, and Kansas City is not immune. There are different approaches to increasing affordable housing and revitalizing neighborhoods. Among the organizations working for change is the Neighborhood Legal Support of Kansas City. The organization looks to empower urban neighborhoods to grow stronger through legal services and providing other resources. Currently focused in the Lykins neighborhood, the Neighborhood Legal Support has been hard at work on community development project in the historic Northeast. And here to tell us more about the project as well as the overall efforts of this vibrant nonprofit is Gregg Lombardi. He's the executive director. Gregg, welcome. Can't wait to dive into all the fun stuff with Neighborhood Legal Support.
Morning, Ruth. Well, let's dive in.
Well, first of all, I think definitions are probably really important at this point. When you say neighborhood legal support, okay, what are we talking about that you all do and you all provide?
So we are a not-for-profit law firm, and we're focused solely on blighted and abandoned housing. And so there is a large amount of blighted and abandoned housing in Kansas City. There are hundreds of houses, and it's strange to imagine, but hundreds of houses where people have just left the houses to sit in very bad condition. And we're not talking about houses that just need a paint job. We're talking about houses where there may be a large hole in the roof, windows are missing, there's substantial fire damage. A lot of them are open to public occupants or access. And for a lot of them, people are breaking into them and using them for illegal purposes. So our goal is to represent neighborhood associations in identifying the blighted and abandoned houses, and then bringing the litigation to allow the neighborhoods to take control of those houses and bring them up to code and turn them into affordable, good quality housing.
How did the organization start? I mean, how do you get into this work?
Well, it's a great line of work. I'm sort of surprised that there aren't more people in it. I used to work with Legal Aid of Western Missouri, which is a not-for-profit civil law firm. I was the executive director there, and after 8 years as executive director, I was burned out, to put it candidly. Great work, but it was a sprint every day. And at the same time, I was very inspired by the work of an attorney named Michael Duffy, who worked for Legal Aid for over 40 years. And he was focused on community development work. And Michael Duffy is the father of the Abandoned Housing Act, which I think Missouri is still the only state in the country that has it. And it was Michael's brainchild. And it says that if a house has been not legally occupied for 6 months, has serious codes violations, as I talked about, and is behind on taxes, then a not-for-profit organization can file a lawsuit in state court and ask the court to give it authority to take over the house and bring it up to code. So anyway, I was very inspired by Michael's work, and at Legal Aid, we were the representative for the city in doing Abandoned Housing Act work, so it had to be done all over the city, kind of on a shotgun approach. And so what we found there is a lot of times we would work with partners and get a house rehabbed, and then 3 houses down, there might be a drug house. And so people wouldn't want to live in the rehabbed house. So it'd sit empty for a while, and then people from the drug house or elsewhere would break into the house and vandalize it, and it'd go back to what it was. So when I left Legal Aid, my concept was to start a focused community development project, which is doing the same work, but on a very focused level. So in Lykins, we started off with just 9 blocks of the neighborhood, and focused our work there and brought as many resources as we could to bear to make sure that all of the blight in that area was wiped out and that we could build out from there.
Are you a party of one? Are you a one person nonprofit?
I am not. It's funny because I like to be a party of one. I like to travel on my own. But things got going, and there are side projects that we wanted to take on, and other things we wanted to do. So 2 years ago, we had 9 people on staff,
Wow.
and part of that was we were providing staffing for the Lykins Neighborhood Association, which was 3 of the staff members. Um, and so we also had a social worker dealing solely with houseless issues, with people without housing, because that was a big issue for the neighborhood, and it was
Right.
also having a very high impact on the blighted houses because houseless people were living in the blighted houses and needed a place to live. Um, so, and so I have intentionally shrunk the organization since then. So we're down to 4 people. Uh, and it's a kind of a strange situation because I like small organizations and I like doing the frontline work myself. And so I'm not a big fan of the administrative side of things. Um, so NLS now has a fantastic opportunity to grow. We've kind of proven our model and we've been really successful in Lykins. And there are other neighborhoods in Kansas City who are kind of asking for our assistance. And there are other cities around the state who need the same assistance. St. Joe, Independence,
Mm-hmm.
Springfield, Joplin all have a ton of blighted and abandoned houses. So we're in a position where we really should grow. And I honestly am not a fan of the idea of growing. So I'm actually going to step down as executive director at about the end of this year. We're doing a executive director search right now. If any of your viewers are people who are interested in this type of work, then they should contact me because we're looking for a high quality executive director who's really devoted to improving housing in the urban core of Kansas City.
All right. So you let it out there. How do they reach you then if they're interested?
Okay, well, it's very easy. It's my first name, Gregg, Gregg, so 2 G's at the end, at NLS, as in Neighborhood Legal Support, the number 4kc.org.
So easy to find you. All right. Well, so you let the cat out of the bag. We're going to talk more about the work you do, but I think it's an
Great.
interesting issue to look at. Here you've been with the organization, you've really built it. It's proven to be successful. How do you make that pivot? And how do you make the pivot and how do you still keep working and make the pivot?
So I'm really excited to make the pivot, and we'll see if that excitement bears out and actually works out. But when I was at Legal Aid, my first job as Legal Aid was to be the deputy executive director, and uh, there's a secret for anybody who wants to work in not-for-profit administration. Deputy executive director is the best job in any organization because you can have all the ideas and none of the responsibility.
Ah,
Uh, so uh, my hope is to be something akin to a deputy executive director and to continue on doing frontline legal work and kind of collaborative work. Um, so my hope and sense is that transition will be pretty darn seamless. I also sort of feel like I get excited when I see new ideas, ideas that are not my own ideas. And so um, when I left Legal Aid, there's a new executive director, Joe Danduran, who's a fantastic person and who took a new kind of different direction for the organization and did fantastic work. And so I'm excited to see what the new executive director at NLS will do and to be highly supportive of that and not second guessing as many founding executive directors get to be second guessers. My hope is that I will avoid doing that.
so you want to stay on and do a little bit of the work, but not do the day to day run the shop, so to
Oh
speak.
my gosh. I mean, monitoring payroll, monitoring the financial situation, dealing with audits, dealing with HR issues. Um, it's uh, those are talents that I mean, I can play like I have, but those are not my real talents.
You want to be out there fighting the fight.
I want to be fighting the fight.
All right, so let's get back to fighting the fight. You
Sure.
all have been big in the Lykins neighborhood. Give us a sense for folks who don't know that neighborhood, what it was like before you all kind of stepped in and what's happened thus far.
Well, first off, I'll tell you where Lykins is, because I didn't know where it was before I got involved. It's in Northeast Kansas City. It's 2.5 miles due east of downtown. A lot of people know the Scarrett Renaissance neighborhood, which is where the Kansas City Museum is. Lykins is immediately to the south and east of that. Um, Lykins is one of the lowest income neighborhoods in the city. When I started, the average household income was $24,000 a year in the neighborhood. It was one of the highest crime neighborhoods in the city. It's also one of the most diverse neighborhoods, probably in all of the Midwest. It's a major refugee resettlement
Mm-hmm.
area. And so it's about 50% Latino, about 20% African American, and then I think 10 to 15%, that may be a little high, maybe 8% refugee population. So, for example, the Whittier Elementary School that serves the neighborhood, last time I checked, there were 19 languages spoken at the
Wow.
school, and I visited there one time, and there's a kindergarten class where every single child in the class spoke a different language. So, very, very diverse neighborhood. Um, and just kind of adding on to why it was very attractive. All of those things made it very attractive to us. There was also a great deal of blight and abandonment, which oddly enough made it attractive for us. And there's a great community resource, which was the Lykins Square Park, which is right kind of in the smack dab in the center of the park, center of the neighborhood. Um, it's about a 2 block size park, so pretty good size park. And when we got into the neighborhood, something that happens frequently with urban parks is that it was no longer used as a park. It was primarily a
Mm.
crime scene. Lots of drug dealing, lots of human trafficking. Children were rarely seen in the park.
Mm.
And what frequently happens in a situation like that is it's a great business model for a drug dealer. And people don't like to live around situations like that.
Yeah.
So people move away from the park, leaving empty houses near the park, which is another business opportunity for the drug dealers. So those houses get broken into. Several of them got burned down. Um, and when we started in Lykins, there were probably, oh, I'd say maybe 25 to 30 houses or lots or parcels of land that faced the park, and only 5 of those were occupied. Uh,
Wow.
One of the things we really wanted to do was bring the park back to life, and that through working with the Kansas City Parks Department, with a really neat not-for-profit called Eco Abet, which is a bunch of planners and architects and landscape architects, and they did a charrette and figured out good uses of the park based on lots and lots of focus groups with neighborhood residents. And we have just finished implementation of all of their plans 4 years later. And now I got to tell you, the park is used very rarely for drug dealing. And Habitat for Humanity has, in the last week, broken ground on construction on 7 new homes on the north side of the park. So there will be a lot more eyes on the park, and there's a lot of activity going on in the park. One of the things that we've done is there's a soccer team of neighborhood kids called EDO. Victor Muniz, wonderful guy, runs that as a volunteer. And so 2 nights a week now, there are 60 to 80 kids playing soccer in the park. And it's just fantastic. Their parents come out, their siblings come out, and it really brings the park to life. And it's just no longer a good place for drug dealers. So that's been a cool thing.
So I'm curious, how do you how do you start this kind of thing, and how are you all, How do you get revenue then to operate, to continue doing what you're doing in a neighborhood like that?
Well, starting any not-for-profit now is a challenge. Um, I think with this, I had a lot of advantages, having come from legal aid and having the administrative experience and the fundraising experience and some of the fundraising connections, although it's kind of different pots of funding that funded this as
Right.
opposed to legal aid. Um, so I had a pretty high comfort level doing it. What I would say for people who want to get involved in something like this, uh, the first route is to find a not-for-profit that you love and work for them, whether as a volunteer or as a staff member, ideally as a staff member, and really learn the ropes doing it. Then, kind of a second step is while you're doing that, look for problems in the urban core that kind of cry out to you. And
Hmm.
so, for me, I'd really love to see the fruits of my labor as a lawyer. Gosh, I was in private practice for oh, I think 16 or 18 years. And even working at legal aid, I didn't get to see a lot of what I produced. I mean, it didn't
Hmm.
produce anything tangible. And doing this work, it's really appealing to me because first, I love architecture, I love housing. Housing is really important to me. And to be able to see a house that is blighted and a magnet for crime turn into a place that's a home for a family is a really cool thing. I also think that that happens to be something that's very appealing to funders, and
Hmm.
um, that you, in looking for not-for-profit opportunities, you want to be mindful of what um, is going to be something that you can raise funds for. And as part of that, you want to look at something that really makes a difference in the community. And the more I got into this work, the more I found that it really made a difference. Because when you take a blighted house and convert it into a good quality home, you're not only creating affordable housing, but you're reducing violent crime. There is a very strong correlation between blighted housing and violent crime. People who commit violent crimes use blighted and abandoned houses as kind of a staging area
Right.
and, and a place for shelter. Um, and so it creates affordable houses, reduces violent crime. It also creates sustainable, great jobs for people who do the rehab work.
Yeah,
It
I hadn't thought about that.
improves the tax base for the city and the county and the local schools, and it just makes the neighborhood a much more livable place.
Well, I'm sure all the people who live up there are thrilled by the work that you are doing. Kind of give us a snapshot of where it is and where, even though you're stepping down as executive director, where you help, let's say the next 2 or 3 years up in Lykins. What will that be?
Well, so first off, as I said, Lykins is due east of downtown by 2.5 miles. Um, Samuel Lykins was the second mayor of Kansas City. We like to say he's the first legal mayor because uh, Mayor Gregory was found to live outside the city limits and was kicked out of office for that, and Lykins came in and took his place. Um, but anyway, so in terms of how we're growing and what we'll be doing, we started, as I said, with a 9 block area. After 18 months, we were out of blighted and abandoned houses to pursue in that area. Um, there was still blight, but the houses were in the pipeline and we had the litigation going on it. So we had to expand it to, I think, about a 30 block area. And then in a year and a half, we were out of blighted and abandoned houses in that area. And then we've expanded it to the full Lykins neighborhood, and we're now out of blighted and abandoned houses in the entire neighborhood. In fact, we actually have a bounty program going. If you can find a house that's blighted and abandoned in Lykins, I'll give you $100. It's a great way for us to scout and find those houses. But anyway, we are expanding the project. So Dunbar, which is over by the VA hospital, just east of the VA
Yeah.
hospital, on the way to the stadium, and Independence Plaza, which is immediately to the west of Lykins. Those are new partner neighborhoods. And we're looking for a third new partner neighborhood. So again, if people know a neighborhood that has a substantial number of blighted and abandoned houses and wants us to come in and turn those into good quality homes, we're eager to talk with them. Our goal is for the city to be out of blighted and abandoned houses by the end of 2034. And candidly, I think that is a highly achievable goal.
That's a big goal, though. Kansas City's a big city. I mean,
It is, but
right?
and we're not alone in this work. I mean, there is a lot of money coming into Kansas City to buy up blighted houses and also to buy up any vacant houses. And so, really, the ones that are left are the ones that are truly abandoned. Either
Hmm.
you have somebody who has passed away and there are no kids to take over the property or who want to take over the property, uh, or you have situations where someone has bought a property and said, this is going to be my retirement income. I'm going to get around to fixing it up someday. And they never do. And it just sits there.
Mm.
And the third class and the most nefarious by far is there are investors who will go in and buy up the worst houses that they can find in a neighborhood and just sit on them for years and sometimes for decades, uh, with the presumption that someday the neighborhood will put in a lot of hard work to turn around their neighborhood and make the blighted houses that this speculator has bought a ton more valuable. And at that point, the speculator will sell them and make a ton of money. And that, sadly, is a pretty good business model. And we're trying to make it not as good of a business model.
So you go in, you do whatever legal work you need to do to get the house. Then how do you go in? Is it your organization's kind of responsibility to get it rehabbed and renovated, or you're partnering with groups to do that?
We're partnering with tons of groups. There are more than 40 organizations and individuals who are involved in this project. Um, and so a big part of the project is it is totally neighborhood powered. I mean, or totally all the decision making is with the neighborhood. And so the way we work things is we work with neighborhood residents, with codes inspectors, and with the police to go out and identify the blighted and abandoned houses in the neighborhood. Then we put together a group of 16 rehabbers who um, who have signed up for the project and have been vetted and approved by the neighborhood association. So we put the word out to those rehabbers, and then they have to apply not to us, but to the neighborhood association for the rights to develop the property. And when they apply, they tell the neighborhood association how much money they're going to invest in it, whether it's going to be owner occupied housing at the end or rental housing, um, what their timeline is, what kind of they do a scope of work for that. And oddly enough, there are plenty of times where there's actually competition among rehabbers for these blighted houses, and the neighborhood association gets to decide which one gets the house. And more and more, we've been working to get homesteaders, people who live in the neighborhood and have rehabbing talents, to take over the house and rehab it to live in themselves. So that is a great thing.
What an empowering model
Yeah,
to
and so and I would also I should end there that saying that once a rehabber is selected, they actually have to enter into a contract with the neighborhood association uh, that commits them to do the work that they said that they will do. And if they fail to do that, the neighborhood association gets a deed of trust, like what you get when there's a mortgage on a property, that says, if you don't do this work, then we get to take the property back and get it in the hands of someone who will do the work.
Is the contract situation pretty good, or have you had to go back and fight any of those?
So we call it community development Darwinism. So it's sort of the survival of the fittest. And there's been a real purpose in having so many rehab partners. So the vast majority of them have done great work. Um, and there have been two or three who have not. And so one of those, I would say the most recalcitrant of the group, we've actually had to sue and brought a new lawsuit against them, and succeeded in that lawsuit, and now have a court order requiring them to fix up the property.
Wow. How can the community outside of these neighborhoods, is there a way for them to engage with your work?
So legal aid still does this work, and it's converting to a model that's very much like our work, like our model. And so they're taking on lots and lots of Abandoned Housing Act cases outside of the Lykins neighborhoods and outside of our other partner neighborhoods. So contacting Legal Aid of Western Missouri is a way um, to handle it. It is feasible for a neighborhood to hire a private attorney to do this type of work. And if a neighborhood wants to go that route and legal aid can't help them, and legal aid obviously has limited resources themselves, um, then I'd be happy to talk with them about how they might arrange that.
So you've been at this work for a while. You're ready to kick off the administrative stuff. Looking back, how would you assess the work you've been doing, and what have you learned in that time?
Wow, there is a lot that I've learned. One of Gosh, it's hard to know where to begin. But one of the most important things is decisions, the best decisions in the urban core are made by people who live in the urban core as opposed to people who are outside of the urban core.
Mm-hmm.
So that's lesson one. Lesson two is that everything that's good is much harder to achieve than it looks, and takes like 3 times longer than you would ever possibly think of to get done. I really thought that we would have the improvements to Lykins Square Park done in 9 months to a year after we came up with the concept and got the funding, and it's been 3 years. And another lesson is many people think that demolition of blighted houses is the solution. They're an eyesore, they look horrible. That is not the solution. One, it costs the city a bunch of money. It's $10,000 to $12,000 at least to demolish a house.
Wow.
Two, oh yeah, and two, I mean, is that once you demolish the house, it's kind of like, oh great, it's gone. But then you have a vacant lot, and that vacant
Mm-hmm.
lot is going to be its own magnet for crime. And right now, it is infeasible to build a new house in the Kansas City urban core and turn a profit on it. A inexpensive house right now, 3 bedroom, slab on grade, simple as you can be, is $250,000. And when you're done building it, it's going to be worth about 190. And so that vacant lot is not going to turn into housing anytime in the near future. And so it's going to be a liability, a flat out liability for the city for decades to come. If, on the other hand, the city got that property into the hands of a good quality rehabber, then the rehabber makes money doing the rehab, creates affordable housing, because you can rehab a house for 80 to 100, maybe $120,000 now, and sell it for 140, and um, an affordable house. Better yet, you can have an organization like not Habitat for Humanity, but other organizations like Healing House or Northeast Neighborhood Trust, which is a great organization which is committed to permanently affordable housing for the
Mm-hmm.
Northeast. Those people can come in and turn it into affordable housing that will remain affordable for perpetuity, as
Well,
opposed to a vacant.
right. It's amazing, what you're doing, and it sounds like it's proving, you know, successful. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for your service as the executive director, and we'll look forward to seeing the transition, but having you still there in the trenches, right?
I love to be in the trenches. I'm gonna stay in the trenches, hopefully as long as I'm standing.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us on Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, which is also a nonprofit. This Casey Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. And to be asked on Casey Cares or underwriting opportunities for the work we do, visit our website, which is kccaresonline.org. Spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and on Instagram at Casey Cares Online. And don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thanks for joining us on